Hello Year 8, welcome to week 3 of your study into Love Poetry for English. This week we're going to be studying the poem Sonnet 43, which is by Elizabeth Browning. Make sure you've got all of your resources with you. You've got a copy of the poem and your fact book as well. Make sure you've also got some pens, pencils, highlighters, anything else that you think you might need. Okay, so let's make a start. We're going to begin with our knowledge check. On the screen in front of you, you've got 4 key terms: hyperbole or hyperbole, semantic field, sonnet, and iambic pentameter. Some of these you may have heard of, but some might be new to you. What I'd like you to do is write those 4 key terms down on a piece of paper and then have a go at writing your own definition for them. What are they? What do they mean? Pause the video here and have a go at this task. Give yourself about 5 minutes. Okay, so let's have a look. Now you've done that task, let's go through and look at the answers. So a hyperbole is the use of exaggeration, basically. So it's an exaggerated statement or a claim. It's not meant to be taken literally. So I've put an example here. You may have heard this said to you before. I've told you to clean your room 1,000,000 times. Now the person probably hasn't said it 1,000,000 times, but they've exaggerated it for effect. So that would be hyperbole. Next one, now we have covered this in a previous week, so hopefully you remembered this one. Semantic field. This is a collection of words which are related to one another through their similar meanings. So I've used the same example as we did a couple of weeks ago. So in a poem about a ship, for example, they might use words such as ocean, waves, sea, tide, and so on. And they would all fit that semantic field of a ship. Next one, a sonnet. So a sonnet is a 1-stanza, 14-line poem, and it is usually written in iambic pentameter. So this is a common style that is used in love poetry. Final one then, iambic pentameter, which again links to that sonnet. This is the pattern or rhythm of a line of poetry. It's where each line has 10 syllables. So I've put the example here. This is a famous line from a sonnet. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? So hopefully you had a go at those. You can mark them if you want. Give yourself a mark out of 4. If there's any that you didn't know, make sure you pause the video here and make some notes of them, because you will need to know these for our analysis of today's poem. Okay, moving on then. So I'm going to give you the opportunity to actually read the poem to yourself now. So take a few moments to read the poem, whether that's reading it aloud or reading it in your head. Alternatively, if you would prefer to listen to an audio version of the poem, there will be a link in the comments section below the video. So click that link and it'll take you to YouTube to watch and listen to an audio version of the poem. So do that now. Okay, so now that you've had a chance to read the poem through, you've got an idea of what Sonnet 43 is about. I'm just going to run through a bit of information for you about the context of this poem. So it is written by a Victorian poet called Elizabeth Barrett Browning, but more commonly referred to as Elizabeth Browning. She first published this poem in 1850. And it was part of a collection of sonnets that she'd written, and they were published in this collection, which was called Sonnets from the Portuguese. So the collection actually had 44 sonnets in total, but Sonnet 43 is the most famous of them all. So a bit more context to her as a person. So Elizabeth Browning was married to the famous poet Robert Browning. You may have heard of him. It is to him that this poem is addressed. So the poem reflects emotional descriptions of love rather than physical love, which would have been more typical of the Victorian era. Elizabeth was extremely religious. She believed in a woman's right to choose her own husband and to marry for happiness. So she actually eloped, she ran away with Robert, and as a result of that, she was disinherited by her father, which essentially means she was cut off from her family and not allowed to see them due to her choice to run away with him. So that's just a bit of context to give you a bit of understanding. If you want to make some notes on those points, then you can pause the video here. Okay, so moving on to our analysis now then. Make sure you've got the poem in front of you, a pen, pencil and highlighter. As we go through, you can add some annotations as I go through and explain and look at the poem in a bit more detail. Okay. How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. I love thee to the depth and breadth and height my soul can reach. So, the beginning of a poem, she is addressing her husband, and she wants to show and explain her love to him. It's a personal opening to the poem. We then have an example of hyperbole here. She says, I love thee to the depth and breadth and height my soul can reach. So she's showing us here the scale of her love. This exaggeration shows her passion and feelings towards her husband. When feeling out of sight for the ends of being an ideal grace, I love thee to the level of every day's most quiet need, by sun and candle light. I love thee freely as men strive for right. I love thee purely as they turn from praise. So you can see here we've got a religious or spiritual use of a semantic field. The poet uses words such as grace, praise, faith, saints. All of these words link to this idea in the semantic field of religion. So she's reinforcing that their love is recognised by God and she has this strong faith. When she says here, most quiet need, she's reflecting the effortless and natural nature of loving him. It comes naturally to her and it is a pure love that she has for him, a most quiet need. We then have use of repetition here. I love thee is used 3 times in those 3 lines. It's her way of reinforcing her love for her husband, and she's describing the different ways that she loves him. I love thee with the passion put to use in my older griefs and with my childhood's faith. I love thee with a love I seem to lose with my lost saints. I love thee with the breath, smiles, tears of all my life, and, if God choose, I shall but love thee better after death. Now another technique that I just want to pick up on is the use of enjambment. We have talked about enjambment before. It's where a line is continued on to the next without use of punctuation, so it encourages the flow of the poem. So you can see where the arrow is here. I love thee with the passion put to use in my old griefs. So this creates an almost sense of excitement or breathlessness. She's sort of excited talking about her husband. Her love is quite palpable at this point. So the use of enjambment is quite important there. So final thing that I just want to pick up on at the end of the poem, when she says, I shall but love thee better after death. This shows her eternal love for her husband. The use of the word death shows that she hopes that God will support their love, suggesting that she believes in its purity, that it will continue even after they have both died. So, quite a lot to pick out there. If you need to pause the video at this point to then use some of these annotations to put on your own copy of the poem, then you can do that now. Okay, finally, just want to look at the structure of the poem and the style that it is written in. So obviously we've talked about the fact that the poem is written as a sonnet. This is a form that is used to express deep love, and hopefully through our analysis you've got that impression that she's showing us her deep love for her husband. Now if we just break the structure of the poem down slightly, if you have a look, the first 8 lines outline her main theme, so her intense love for her husband. But then in the next sextet, which is the next 6 lines, these refer to the lasting effects of her feelings. So she talks about from her childhood to her death. So what I'd like you to do at this point is just see if you can identify this structure and highlight those sort of differences, those different sections. You can highlight those and label it. Once you've done that, I want you to also think about the use of iambic pentameter. So we talked about this right at the start of the lesson. If you're unsure, have a look at your notes about what that means. So it's written in this style. I want you to see if you can identify the 10 syllables in each line, whether you do that by underlining them or highlighting them. And then I want you to think about what you notice about where the emphasis lands on each line. So you've got those 10 syllables, but where is the emphasis? Do this by reading it aloud. This is just for you to get a feel for how the iambic pentameter works. Have a go at these 2 tasks, make those notes, and then that is the end of the lesson. Thanks for this week. See you next week. Bye.